Is your romance actually a hidden contract? Most people think love is pure, that it exists beyond negotiation, free from the calculations of gain and loss. But beneath the warmth of affection lies an invisible structure, an agreement rarely spoken but always felt. One gives more, one sets the terms, the other adapts, shrinks, or performs to keep the balance from collapsing. You might call it chemistry. You might call it compatibility. But sometimes what feels like attraction is actually hierarchy, a silent trade between emotional labor and validation, between who chases and who is chased. You felt it, that quiet pressure to please, to maintain harmony even when it costs you your authenticity. Or the opposite, the subtle thrill of being the one who decides, who withholds, who sets the emotional tone. Love, stripped bare, is never just love. It's a dance of power disguised as tenderness. And the more unconscious you are of that dynamic, the more it controls you. Today, we unravel that hidden contract, not to destroy it, but to see it clearly. Because only in awareness can love become something deeper than control, a meeting of equals, not captor and captive.
Friedrich Engels, the philosopher who dared to connect love with power. In The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State, Engels proposed that the way we love mirrors the way societies are structured, that relationships are not isolated from politics, economics, or hierarchy, they are microcosms of them. The domestic realm, he argued, was the first stage on which power, ownership, and dependency were rehearsed. To Engels, love under inequality is never neutral. It's a reflection of the world's power systems, internalized and played out through emotional bonds. The man's dominance, the woman's dependency, not natural, but socially engineered. And though modern relationships have evolved, the traces remain. Who earns more? Who invests emotionally? Who initiates or withdraws? Engels forces us to confront a truth that most romantic ideals ignore, that love is not immune to structure. Even our longing for balance is shaped by what we've been taught to expect from gender, status, and validation. To see this is not to become cynical, it's to become conscious. Because when you understand how systems of control seep into your personal life, you can stop reenacting them unconsciously. You stop performing for approval. You stop mistaking possession for security. Engels reminds us that freedom in love requires awareness of power, that affection without sovereignty becomes servitude, and equality without strength becomes illusion. And so the question shifts, not who has more power, but who depends, because where dependency exists, control soon follows.
Every relationship carries an invisible balance of power, a tension between giving and withholding, pursuing and retreating, leading and following. It's not something you sign or agree to. It just is. It lives in every silence, every look, every decision about who reaches out first and who waits to be reached. Power in relationships is rarely about dominance in the obvious sense. It's about influence. Who sets the emotional weather? Who defines what normal feels like? Who makes the other adjust? One partner might appear soft and accommodating, while the other remains composed and detached, yet both are playing roles in a pattern of dependency and control. Engels saw this centuries ago, that the personal is political. What happens in the home mirrors what happens in society. The structures of ownership, hierarchy, and labor all find their reflection in the private sphere of love. Today, that ownership doesn't always take the form of money or marriage. It shows up as emotional leverage. One person's calm becomes the other's anxiety. One's approval becomes the other's drug. And here's where the illusion begins. We confuse power with love. We believe the one who makes us feel small must hold something precious, that their attention means we are chosen,
that their indifference means we must earn more of them. We turn love into labor. We confuse being needed with being respected. But genuine attraction doesn't thrive in submission. It breathes in autonomy. The most magnetic relationships are those where neither partner depends on the other for identity. Instead, each stands firm, rooted in self-respect, self-direction, and self-trust. Power imbalances arise not because one person is cruel, but because one person forgets themselves. The moment you abandon your standards to keep peace, you hand over quiet control. The moment you stop saying what you mean, you let fear run the dynamic. The one who needs the least, not emotionally, but existentially, always has more influence. And yet, balance isn't achieved by pretending to be indifferent. It's achieved by grounding yourself so deeply that love no longer destabilizes you. When you don't chase, manipulate, or shrink to maintain connection, you begin to see the structure clearly. You begin to realize that relationships aren't tests of worth, they're mirrors of consciousness. In every bond, the question is not who holds power, but who remains self-possessed when power shifts, because it always does. Sometimes you'll lead, sometimes you'll yield. The key is whether your identity survives both roles. So when you feel the anxiety of disconnection, the urge to fix, to control, to prove, pause. That discomfort is your teacher. It's revealing where you've built your worth on someone else's approval. And in that revelation lies freedom. Engels' insight wasn't meant to strip love of beauty. It was to remind us that even in intimacy, sovereignty matters. Because love without equality becomes submission, and equality without strength becomes performance. The goal isn't to destroy power dynamics. They're inevitable. The goal is to become conscious of them, to meet them with awareness, not anxiety. To love without losing your footing. To give without erasing yourself. That is true sovereignty. Not control over another, but mastery over your own emotional economy. And when two self-possessed people meet, their love doesn't drain, it amplifies. Not a hierarchy, a harmony.
You felt it before, that quiet imbalance, the slow, invisible shift from ease to tension. At first, everything felt mutual, fluid, effortless. You laughed easily, conversations stretched into the night, and every glance carried electricity. But then, something changed. You began to notice who texted first, who apologized more, who reached out to repair the silence. You told yourself it was nothing, that relationships have rhythms. Yet deep down, you started to calculate. You adjusted your words, your tone, your timing, just to keep things smooth. You began reading between messages, analyzing pauses, wondering if you were too much or not enough. You started living in a quiet negotiation, trading authenticity for approval. You began to sense that the connection wasn't about love anymore. It was about position. She could withdraw affection, and you'd feel it instantly, like a shadow crossing the sun. Suddenly, your peace depended on her mood. Your confidence depended on her validation. And no matter how much you tried to be patient, understanding, or calm, something in you was always chasing. You began to lose yourself, not in love, but in maintaining permission to stay loved. You didn't notice a shift at first because it happened slowly. Every small compromise seemed harmless. Saying yes when you meant no, withholding truth to avoid conflict, minimizing your needs to appear composed. But each of those moments chipped away at your center. And this is how power quietly transfers, not through control, but through compliance. When you make peace your highest priority, you surrender your sovereignty. When you depend on another person's attention to feel whole, you turn love into a transaction. That's when attraction starts to decay. Because deep down, no one respects what they can easily control.
The woman who once admired your calm now senses your hidden anxiety. The polarity reverses. She begins to test, to push, to pull away. Not always out of cruelty, but instinct. She's searching for the boundary that tells her you still know who you are. You feel frustrated, confused, even humiliated. You wonder, what did I do wrong? But the truth isn't in what you did, it's in what you stopped being. Respect and love doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from remembering your center. When you reclaim your ground, something shifts. Your energy steadies. You stop performing. You stop chasing equilibrium and become equilibrium. That's when the tests end. That's when connection stops feeling like a battlefield and starts feeling like alignment. Most people never see this clearly. They call it chemistry, timing, or luck. But you're starting to notice the real mechanism, the quiet exchange of power beneath every romantic pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because power and love isn't about control, it's about composure. And every time you choose to stay grounded when emotion rises, you rewrite the contract of the connection itself.
You see, what we call love often begins as equality and ends as structure. Two free individuals meet, both curious, both vulnerable, both magnetized by something unspoken. But as intimacy deepens, the human instinct to define, secure, and control begins to rise. What started as connection slowly morphs into contract. Not a written one, a silent, emotional one. I'll give you attention if you give me reassurance. I'll give you affection if you give me control. And so begins the quiet economy of power that hides inside affection. Friedrich Engels once wrote that relationships mirror the broader social order, that even romance becomes a microcosm of hierarchy, dominance, and dependency. The same mechanisms that rule politics and economics find their way into the heart. Love in this light is not free from power, it is power. You may think your conflict is emotional, but beneath it lies something structural. Who decides what's too much? Who defines the terms of peace? Who gets to withdraw without explanation? These are not romantic questions, they are questions of power. And here's the paradox, the one most never see. Even those who appear to have power suffer under its illusion. The one who dominates lives in quiet fear of losing control. The one who submits becomes addicted to approval. Both remain trapped in a cycle of dependence, each feeding the other's insecurity, each mistaking tension for intimacy. This is why relationships that begin with passion often end with resentment. Because the very thing that draws two people together, the polarity of strength and surrender, becomes distorted when one side seeks security at the cost of authenticity. The truth is unsettling. Love cannot exist where fear governs. If you love someone because you fear losing them, it's not love, it's attachment. If you give affection to avoid rejection, it's not connection, it's negotiation. True power in love isn't about who leads or follows. It's about who remains real. When you stop competing for control, something profound happens. Presence returns. The energy of manipulation dissolves, and you begin to see the other not as a rival or possession, but as another sovereign being. This doesn't mean equality erases polarity, it refines it. Because the highest form of attraction is not between two halves seeking completion, but between two wholes who choose to meet freely, again and again. That's the hidden truth. Love isn't destroyed by power, it's destroyed
by imbalance. And once you learn to see the architecture beneath your emotions, the hidden scaffolding of desire, dependence, and dominance, you begin to relate differently. You stop playing roles. You start living truth.
You cannot build equality in love by demanding it. You build it by embodying it. True balance doesn't start in the relationship. It starts within you. The way you relate to yourself becomes the blueprint for how others relate to you. If you abandon your own needs, others will too. If you constantly prove your worth, you'll attract people who need you to perform to keep their attention. So, what's the practice? It begins with awareness, noticing where you give power away. Ask yourself, do you silence yourself to keep peace? Do you chase clarity when someone withdraws instead of standing still in your truth? Do you mistake anxiety for chemistry, submission for devotion, or attention for love? Every small compromise of self for emotional safety is a seed of imbalance, and soon you find yourself orbiting someone else's gravity, forgetting that you too were meant to have a center. This is where the wisdom of Confucius meets the modern heart. Stability begins with ritual. Power dynamics aren't maintained by dramatic events. They're maintained by daily habits, by the way you text first every time, by the way you shrink during disagreement, by the way you overgive to earn warmth. These micro actions are not neutral. They reinforce who holds emotional leverage. Reclaiming your power, then, is not about confrontation, it's about consistency. Start with the small, sacred rituals that anchor you in autonomy. Speak slowly. Pause before you explain yourself. Leave space and silence rather than rushing to fill it with reassurance. Let your presence, not your pleading, communicate your worth. When you learn to hold yourself in discomfort, you become ungovernable by another's moods. That's when respect naturally follows. Because respect is not granted, it's reflected. You'll notice something subtle begin to shift. People who once tested your boundaries will pause before doing so again. Those who once withdrew to control you will feel less certain of their influence. And those who seek connection, not control, will be drawn to you with ease. Because you're no longer relating from need, but from wholeness. That is how equality feels in practice. Not loud, not performative, but quietly unshakable. Remember, you don't need to dominate to be powerful. You don't need to prove to be worthy. Your mere alignment, your ability to stay centered while others wobble, is what redefines every relationship you touch. Power in love isn't about control over another. It's about responsibility for yourself. And when two people meet from that place, where neither clings nor commands, love stops being a struggle for balance. It becomes a rhythm. Because in the end, respect is not something you demand. It's something you embody. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you no longer negotiate your worth. You're not anxiously decoding messages or wondering if silence means rejection. You're not performing to earn affection or shrinking to keep peace. You're simply present, rooted, aware of your value even when no one else affirms it. This is what it feels like when the old power dynamic dissolves. Before, you were entangled, reacting to every shift in energy, trapped in emotional economics. If I give more, I'll be loved more. But love, when filtered through insecurity, always becomes a transaction. You were giving away pieces of yourself to maintain connection, mistaking exhaustion for devotion. Now, something deeper has taken its place. A quiet knowing, a self-command that cannot be borrowed or bought. You stopped reaching for control, and in that surrender, paradoxically, you found real power. You no longer chase certainty. You create it by standing firm in your boundaries. You no longer beg for respect. Your composure earns it before a word is spoken. There's a calmness in how you move now. Not the calm of indifference, but of presence. You can look at someone you desire and not lose yourself in the reflection. You can give love without fear because it's no longer tied to approval. You're not afraid to walk away, not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. And strangely, this grounded energy draws others closer, not because you're trying, but because stillness has gravity. You've shifted from playing roles, the rescuer, the pleaser, the performer, to embodying what Confucius, Sartre, and even Nietzsche hinted at in different ways: the dignity of being. This is the new rhythm of love, mutual, steady, unforced. A dance between equals, not competitors. You no longer orbit others to feel seen. You shine where you stand. That is what true power in love looks like. Not dominance, not submission, but presence. The kind of presence that says, I am already whole. And when you live from that truth, every relationship becomes reflection, not validation.
You followed this journey with me, peeling back the layers of power, control, and subtle manipulation that shape our lives. Now, the real question isn't what you've learned, it's what you'll do with it. Knowledge alone is comfortable. Action is uncomfortable. And growth? It always lives in that discomfort. Ask yourself, how many moments have you stood by, complicit, while power dynamics shaped your choices without your awareness? How many times have you allowed someone else's influence to define your sense of worth? Recognizing these patterns is the first step, but recognition without response is a trap. It's just another form of passive submission. This is your invitation, not to become cynical, not to withdraw, but to reclaim your agency. Start observing, start questioning, start setting boundaries that don't just protect you, but elevate you. Watch your relationships, your interactions, your own internal narratives with the same scrutiny we've explored here. And here's the subtle challenge. In the coming week, identify one area where power is quietly dictating your choices and take deliberate action to reclaim it. It doesn't have to be monumental. The shift begins in small, consistent decisions. If you commit to this, I promise, your awareness will sharpen, your presence will deepen, and your life will begin to reflect you rather than the silent forces around you. Are you ready to step out of the shadow, or will you let the currents of influence carry you unchallenged once again?